Hello and welcome to another episode of Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear. We're back with another innovator interview, and if you're interested in green investing, I strongly encourage you to stay tuned today because this is going to be a fascinating conversation with Alf Poor, who's the CEO of Ideanomics, which is building an amazing company trying to solve a number of major problems in transportation. Now, you know, the evolution of transportation is going to depend on successfully building out infrastructures for vehicle charging, the introduction of new electric alternatives to cars, trucks, buses, motorcycles, and scooters that are powered by gas, as well as new approaches for paying for mobility. We may soon just be paying for the distance we travel while the vehicles we use become shared assets managed and maintained by companies that specialize in specific types of transportation. Now, Ideanomics is taking a holistic approach to solving these problems, and I think this is really amazing stuff. The company is traded on the NASDAQ exchange under the symbol IDEX. Ideanomics, which you can find out more about at ideanomics.com, that's IDEANOMICS.com, has launched several companies, including Energica, a maker of performance electric motorcycles, and commercial fleet operator Medici Motorworks, which is building trucks and other solutions for public transit and private distribution companies. Solectrac, the first American manufacturer of electric tractors. Treelectric, a Malaysian electric scooter maker. And Wave, a contactless charging solution for electric vehicles and other sustainably oriented companies that you basically drive over and it charges a bus or a car. Welcome to the show, Alf. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, and great to have you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us because really fascinating stuff. Now, your approach to building sustainable transportation infrastructures is pretty aggressive. You're solving a variety of problems. How do you summarize what Ideanomics does as a company? Are you an incubator? Are you an investment fund that operates like an operating company? Can you?
No, we're a publicly traded operating company. Mm-hmm. But the name Ideanomics, it's obviously a made-up word, but the idea is it's meant to be the intersection between innovation and capital. And so that's what we're doing. We're using our company, which is a public company, which we've raised capital through the public markets, mm-hmm. to build and invest in some really interesting technologies that can help solve some of the environmental problems that, particularly on the side that we're interested in, that are caused by the commercial fleet industry.
Now, you also take very progressive approaches to building these companies. For instance, Solectrac is a certified B Corporation. You make electric tractors. How do you bring the farming industry into the new world? Is it simply a matter of providing the technology and that they will adopt it, or do you have a lot of education to do for farmers around the world with regard to how to use electric and regenerative farming to start to restore our environment?
Well, farming's one of the ones that, let me take a step back. If you Sure. Look at the electrification of the automotive industry right now, Tesla's the forerunner. It's quite a way out there, and big automotive's starting to catch it. There's some really interesting folks in the space. We take a slightly different approach. We say, okay, where is EV best suited? Mm-hmm. Okay, and if you think about the places where we grow our crops, we consider Mother Nature and the rural areas to be the most pristine. Mm-hmm. The vehicles that run in those areas that help agriculture, obviously, sow and harvest crops, they are regulated much less heavily than the passenger cars, trucks, and buses that are on our roads. So the diesel emission standards are much less for those, which really, when you consider it, it's a very strange phenomenon. The places that we grow our livestock, that we grow our crops, have the least amount of protection from emissions from diesel engines. So, you have a diesel tractor running, and it's idling while it's going up and down roads, etc. It's coughing out a tremendous amount of pollutants into the air. Those are settling back down in the soil and being sequestered by the plants that we eat, or being, consumed by the livestock when they eat the grass and the hay and the other things that we obviously raise our livestock on. So for me, we're looking at where is internal combustion engines doing the most damage, mm-hmm. and how can we be influential in those sectors? And agriculture is one of the most obvious slam dunks to convert into zero emissions.
Well, now you're the CEO of Selectrac said on Earth Day 2021 that you're also encouraging regenerative farming practices. So how do you do that?
Well, one of the things we want to do at Selectrac is we don't want to build these gargantuan combine harvesters and tractors, because the weight of those vehicles actually crushes down the soil and prevents crops when they're grown from sequestering the carbon back out to give us that counterbalance that Mother Nature intended when things like carbon do come into the atmosphere. So it's not just that they're running on diesel and they don't have the same pollution standards that passenger vehicles and trucks and buses do. It's the fact that they're actually so big, so heavy when we do this manufactured style farming that we do, particularly in the US and Canada on the Great Plains. They're actually not only polluting, but they're adding to the problem because the carbon that does come can't be sequestered back through the soil by the plant. So that's what we mean when we say regenerative farming. Right. How do you have a lighter touch than the way that current mass farming approaches agriculture?
So let's talk a little about scooters, because Treelectric, is an electric scooter company in Malaysia. And I've been to Malaysia. There is a huge emphasis on small vehicles, one that we aren't familiar with here in the States. How did you settle on scooters as a key area?
Yeah, again, we're looking at a market where we can be most impactful. Mm-hmm. And if you go down to the ASEAN region, as it's called in South Asia, some of the world's densest cities and most populated countries are there. Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, the Philippines, Vietnam, etc. Two-wheelers and three-wheelers are the mainstay of transportation there. There are more two-wheeler taxis in that region than there are three- and four-wheel taxis. And it seems odd to us to jump on the back of a two-wheeler moped or a motorbike and put your arms around somebody to get from A to B. But that's how it works in those dense cities, because the larger vehicles can't navigate the heavy traffic. So if you look at a country like Indonesia, for instance, mm-hmm. that is the largest two-wheeler market in the world. There are over 100 million motorbikes with internal combustion engines in Indonesia alone. So by investing in a company, we acquired 51% of Treelectric, which also is the king of Malaysia, who's very environmentally forward as well in terms of a country leader. He's an investor in the company as well. That gives us a springboard to get access to those really dense two-wheeler and three-wheeler markets, start switching those vehicles out for electric vehicles that don't have the emission problems that these internal combustion engine, petrol as they call it, gasoline as we do in that part of the world. If we can take 100 million motorbikes out of Indonesia that are running on gasoline and replace them with EV, then, we've just significantly reduced that part of the world's pollution problem.
Particularly the two-stroke engines,
which is what the majority of them are.
Now, this is interesting. You're thinking about this from a regional perspective, but you see regional innovation crossing over into other regions and spawning new innovation in addition?
We do. Yeah, we do. I mean, if you look at the investment we took in Energica, which is the Italian motorbike company that we took an investment in, they're in the heart of Motor Valley, right? They're where Lamborghini, Ferrari, where it's all about more horsepower, more fuel use. And so they're tackling an issue as well. Like, how do you address the performance market? Because that's where a lot of the energy is consumed. So, you think about, we all love the kind of the idea of a Harley Davidson on the open road, but whenever you hear that engine noise, that really loud roar, that's pollution and fossil fuel being burned. So we invested in them so we could say, okay, let's not just address the bottom end of the market. Let's address the top end of the market where high energy is consumed as well.
So that's interesting. What you're doing is taking the same essential approach that VW does, where they have Bugatti, where they test very high-end technology, and then they bring it to the VW and the rest of their brands later on. So you're thinking that Energica and Treelectric are components of a vertically integrated approach to disseminating innovation?
100%. That's what we're looking to do. We're looking to say, okay, how can we look at the performance sector, mm-hmm. right? Which is where, as you just mentioned, where all of the innovation is going to come in battery and charging technology, because that end of the market is going to demand the performance and the fast charging. That will dictate what gets watered down and comes into the Treelectric bikes, which are used more commercially or as a cheaper budget form of transport, so to speak. So we're trying to look at this from a kind of full value chain. say, okay, how can we not only make some smart investments, how can they be synergistic, vertically integrated, and help each other throughout the life cycle of where this innovation is going?
But before I get to what a staff meeting must be like in your company, I want to ask about WAVE. Now, WAVE is a plate that essentially lays into the street that will charge, for instance, a bus as it stops at a bus stop. How did that idea come about? Was it spawned by the fact that you were looking at so many different charging challenges, or did you have a technology and you were looking for an application?
We were looking, when you make an investment, you're trying to look, particularly when you're a public company and you have shareholders, you're trying to future-proof your investments as much as you can. And when we looked at the companies that were in the high-capacity charging space, okay, there was either very heavy cables, which are a trip and fall hazard. They're a temperature hazard because the thermals on those cables can get very hot when you do high-powered charging. They're always stuck in the most awkward of places. They get backed into and things like that because high-powered charging is around trucks, around buses, around vans. But also, the only other alternative was people were looking at trains and saying, okay, how can I bring in catenary charging for the high power? How can I leverage what I've already invested in the train industry, bring it over? And I sat there and I thought, well, these things are interesting, but we're moving more and more to a world where vehicles will become autonomous.
Right.
In a world where there is no driver, how can you plug something in? How can you connect to a catenary system? Surely the smart way to do this would be an autonomous vehicle can very easily align over something that is essentially a GPS coordinate for it and get its charging that way. And so that's why we took a look at WAVE in particular, because it gave us a future-proof view. And also think about it from a kind of environmental standpoint. If you're producing lots of cables with heavy insulation and things around them, it may be way better than burning fossil fuels, but it's still a pretty hefty carbon footprint. So how can I remove the need for all that heavy rubber and plastic and everything that are ugly, carbon heavy industries? How can I find something that's a bit more elegant and a bit more future proof? And that's what the WAVE acquisition did for us.
So do you think we're missing opportunities in terms of thinking of wired connections? Because we do tend to talk about a wired solution for the world. This sounds to me like thinking about grocery delivery or food delivery prior to the smartphone. The smartphone changed everything because it reorganized the consumer's relationship with plates. And the wires define our relationship to our physical environment today. So we need to look beyond that. It sounds like that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I believe we do. If you look at a natural progression for anything, I mean, I'm speaking to you today, on a laptop that is running from a wireless internet connection and is currently not being charged because I've gone to a quiet space in my home office to be able to talk to you. So, I'm completely without wires as we're talking now. And I think this is a natural progression with all technology. I think the need to be connected to something is very restrictive. There's a lot more freedom around not being tethered. And I think that applies to everything from convenience through to safety. Because when you are tethered to something, there's something there that's problematic from health and safety perspective, trip and fall perspective. These cables get hot, as you know, from time to time. You wonder why an adapter you put in the wall, why is it getting hot? Well, because electricity is, it's energy, and energy causes heat.
Now, are your companies organized to capture local insights that are?
Yes, they are.
And then how do you share that? And this goes to the question of what's a staff meeting like at Ideanomics where you're sitting down? Do you have the CEOs of the companies involved in these conversations?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we're very active at a regional level with the state governments. So we speak to each of those. It's a very dynamic environment. There's a lot of excitement. We feel like we're changing things for the better. So there's a tremendous amount of energy in every room that we're in. But some of our best information is coming at a local level. So, if you look at California, which tends to be the gold standard, at least at this point for environmental, the California Air Resources Board, CARB, I mean, they are so way ahead of things. They're finally getting to off-road when most of the regional authorities are just starting to look at air quality for on-road vehicles. So, having your finger on the pulse. I mean, we speak, with the team here in New Jersey, where I live, New York area, and we're trying to take that and evangelize it and advocate for it out into some of the less progressive states as well. And so there's two things you want to be listening for in the market. One is who's communicating good news and who's not communicating. And you want to be talking to both of them.
Yeah.
Because the ones who are not communicating are the ones that you need to bring the education from, the ones that are communicating and say, hey, this is what's happening in California. This is what they're seeing. This is how it's progressing. This will come to your state. How can we help you prepare for it?
So the other signal I see in the shape of your company, Ideanomics has several financial services efforts, including DBOT, which is a stock trading platform for micro and small cap stocks, TM2, which is a technology-centric metals commodities marketplace. Makes a lot of sense in terms of what you're working on for electrification. And then Timios, which is a real estate transaction platform. And they're all predicated on the idea of greater transparency and decentralized financing in new companies. So, but you traded on the NASDAQ. Are our markets organized today to really finance these things appropriately?
We're seeing a tremendous revolution in the fintech sector. I mean, we obviously have some very interesting investments and some exciting companies in that side of the house. But remember, whenever you're dealing with something like we are with the EV sector, these are big ticket items, right? Whether it's a passenger car that we don't work with, or it's a tractor, or it's a truck, or it's a bus, it needs to be financed. So us having a fintech division allows us to keep our finger on the pulse of what the financial services industry is doing to support the automotive, to support the capital equipment financing for charging and others. And along the way, we've found some very interesting companies. I mean, Timios out of California, they are, just an amazingly well-run organization, but also they give the consumers who buy homes a fair crack of the whip. So, whenever we do a home purchase or a refinance, there's a slew of things that says services you can shop for.
Sure.
And your mortgage title insurance premiums in there. They offer a flat, transparent rate to their customers. It's an amazing thing that they do. I look back at my documents and I'm angry because I look at what I did when I purchased my home and refinanced it. I didn't pay any attention to these numbers. What they're doing is they're saying, okay, life's getting much more transparent. Consumers should be well informed. Here's a platform through which they get a fair crack of the whip. And whoever's doing the closing doesn't get to keep a large portion of the cash, which is essentially theirs.
So this is fascinating to me. We talk often about the fact that by measuring our economy, we have the opportunity to optimize it. And what you have done, it sounds like, is Ideanomics is predicated on measuring every layer of the business as well as the businesses you might enter. So how does that, in your mind, change the funding of companies or projects like, let's say, the electrification of the state of Washington in the future? Is decentralized finance or DeFi the right way to start thinking about solving some of these problems?
What we're trying to do, and several people in the industry are trying to advocate for this as well, not just at Ideanomics, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to move, and I think you touched on at the beginning, mobility into the service sector. Mm-hmm. Currently, it's a CapEx-heavy purchase, and the OpEx is the energy or the fuel in gasoline and diesel that has powered it, plus whatever maintenance cost you might have would be your OpEx cost. And we're looking to flip that. So we're looking to say, okay, let's make a truck or a bus, plus the charging equipment, plus the energy to run it. Let's make those available as a service. Mm-hmm. And that's really ultimately what the fleet operators want. And that's where having your finger on the pulse of the latest fintech innovation is very useful to us. We understand the capital markets very well. We understand the mortgage financing markets very well. We understand general financing, lease financing, and other things like that. So by owning these entities, we keep our kind of hand on the or finger on the pulse of what's really happening. And the fleet operator, he wants to pay per kilometer or per mile,
right,
for his vehicles. I believe in the future that's exactly the way it will be done. And particularly when you see something disruptive like EV, his balance sheet is built around internal combustion engines, not around buying an electric vehicle that requires charging apparatus, and most of his total cost of ownership savings come in years 6 to 10. That doesn't help him today because he's got a large capital investment he has to make that his balance sheet can't support.
So that suggests to me that as we go to a services-based approach to moving stuff, that we also be able to price in the cost of transportation in a much more specific and potentially carbon-aware way. Do you anticipate a carbon tax or a price on carbon as part of how you are going to build the profitability of Ideanomics? Will you be able to claim credits, for instance?
Yeah, I really hope that, that there is an acceleration in taxing fossil fuels. Mm-hmm. I think that would be really interesting, as well as having carbon credits for people who have a much lower carbon footprint. I think the balance of the two is going to be helpful in reaching that tipping point. I think it's going to take us a bit of time as a country to get there. The utility grid cannot currently take a switch to electric vehicles only. There just isn't enough capacity in the grid. I mean, I charge my electric vehicle once every couple of weeks. I'm lazy. I let it get down to about 15%. I charge it back up. It takes about 6 hours. That's around 2 days worth of power use for my home, right, for the family home. So if everybody thinks, I can just come in and charge it at night, well, the grid can't give you and everybody in 6 hours overnight 2 days worth of power consumption for the average home. The capacity is just not in the grid to cope with it.
And particularly at certain times of the day.
Right. Now, which is where things like, on my home, I've got solar panels. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I've now got energy storage units in my basement. So they take the sun's energy, they can, convert it, store it in these large batteries, mine are Tesla Powerwalls. And then I can discharge that energy overnight, or I can discharge that into my charging, which is what I prefer to do. So every time my vehicle's charged, it's essentially clean energy that's going into it.
Sure. And so as you look, this is so systemic. It's a fascinating idea. If you look 5 or 10 years out, you imagine Ideanomics having sort of disrupted traditional transportation, introduced sustainable products, providing transparency and improving consumer choice. What business are you in at that point? Are you in the transportation business, or are you the infrastructure of everything in your mind?
Well, fintech led us into EV, and we embraced it because ultimately we saw ourselves as an ESG play. It's a buzzword these days, but it basically means getting into a line of business where you're improving that particular industry. So whether it's more value for money for people, greater transparency or governance, or less impact on the environment, most of us have been successful in other businesses that are in the management team at Ideanomics. We wanted to come in and do something meaningful. So we're in the ESG business. And at some stage, some of these businesses like the EV business or the Ideanomics Capital business, they may graduate out of Ideanomics. But Ideanomics will be in the next business which really needs a helping hand, really needs the advocacy, the education, and somebody to get behind it and give it a push, who can have a holistic view of things like me and my management team do. So that may be aerospace and the space sector. Who knows what it may be in the future? But we're looking at businesses where we move the ball forward. To give you an American football analogy, right? Give you a football analogy. We want to move the ball down the field significantly so that we're doing good.
So my last question is, do you have to spend most of your time educating executives who you're talking to about the potential to collaborate or acquire their companies? Or is this really a consumer education problem, so they start to drive businesses towards the ESG model that you're describing?
It really depends who you're talking to. If you meet a Steve Heckeroff, who started Selectrac as a family business before we acquired it, we didn't need to educate Steve. Sure. He is an engineering designer, industrial designer, so the tractors came very easy to him. But he's also fundamentally an environmentalist. Mm-hmm. So he was able to teach us a lot of things as well as us. So, that was high fives from the first meeting, because that was a really, really good fit for the ethos of his company and our company. Some of the other companies, you've got to get them to see the bigger picture. They've been focused on a very vertical solution and problem that they're trying to solve. And we have to help them understand how they fit into a much bigger picture and how they can, not only impact their own company, but also the companies upstream and downstream for them as well.
Well, this is obviously a story that's going to continue to play out, so we'd love to have you come back and talk more, but thank you very much for taking the time with us today.
It will be my pleasure to come back. No problem. Thank you, Mitch.
We've been talking with Alf Poor. He's the CEO of Ideanomics, and what a fascinating conversation. It's amazing to see companies beginning to think across problem sets rather than having just one solution to one problem. And the way these things are going to fit together is how we are going to discover the shape of this new economy that we're trying to build. So check out Ideanomics. They're at ideanomics.com, Ideanomcs. Did I say that right? But Ideanomics, it'll be in the article link as well. And it's publicly traded on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange under the symbol IDEX. This is Earth 911 Sustainability in Your Ear. We're going to be back with another interview soon. In the meantime, I hope you'll take some time to share this podcast and many others that we've done, more than 230 now, with your friends. Let's get these ideas out there, everybody. Take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a great day.